My real story of overcoming. I was betrayed by the person I loved and judged by my family, but I got up and managed to turn it around. I don't even know where to begin, but perhaps telling you about the day everything changed in my life will make sense. It was a Tuesday. I remember it like it was yesterday, because I spent the previous night awake, mulling over everything that had happened. I had spent almost a year without seeing or speaking to anyone in my family, after discovering my girlfriend Anna in bed with my twin brother Matthias. I thought I was going crazy that day. I was in shock. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, hit him, her, or myself. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was the way everyone blamed me, as if I were the crazy one, as if I had caused it. I left home that same day without looking back. I dropped everything. The only thing I wanted was silence, peace, to disappear. And I managed it for a while. Until that Tuesday, I was at work, doing what I always did, trying not to think about anything, when my cell phone started ringing non-stop. It was Adriana, my cousin. I answered impatiently, but when I heard her voice, my body froze. She told me that Matthias and Anna were getting married, and that she was pregnant. It was like someone had knocked the last of my breath out of me. I couldn't respond. I just stood there, the phone to my ear, feeling the world spin, as if I'd been run over again. I went to the company bathroom, locked. Inside, trying to comprehend what I'd just heard. I wasn't crying anymore. It was as if I had no tears left. It was an emptiness, a hole, an echo inside my chest. The first thing that came to mind was, what if this child is mine? I remembered the last few weeks before discovering the betrayal, the times we'd been together, unprotected, never imagining it would all end this way. And worst of all, no one in my family, not my parents, not my aunts and uncles, no one even considered calling me, telling me, asking me anything. Only Adriana, who had always been the only one who treated me like a person, not a burden. I stared at the cold wall of that bathroom, trembling, unsure if I was angry, afraid, ashamed, disgusted, all mixed together. I wanted to disappear, but at the same time, something inside me began to stir. I couldn't accept being treated like this, erased, as if I didn't exist, as if the pain I felt was nothing. I washed my face, looked in the mirror, and for the first time in months, I saw a worn-out guy, skinny, with dark circles under his eyes, but still alive. I was still there. I introduced myself. My name is Gabriel. I'm 27, and I wasn't going to run away anymore. I left the bathroom, left work that day, and went home without even knowing what to do first. I called Adriana back and asked her to tell me everything. She said she'd heard it from Anna herself, that they were engaged, that the wedding would be in 2 months, that the whole family was going, and that no one had even mentioned my name. I asked if she knew how far along the pregnancy was, and when she told me, my heart raced. It was beating perfectly with how long we'd been together. I sat on the living room floor, cell phone in hand, my body trembling, my head spinning. The hours of that day passed in a blur. I paced, not eating, not sleeping, just thinking about what to do. I remembered every detail of my childhood with Matthias, how inseparable we were, how we shared everything, and how I never imagined he would be the one to betray me in the most disgusting way possible. I remembered my parents' faces when they blamed me, as if the betrayal were my fault, as if I had forced something, as if I had made it up. I thought about texting, calling, yelling, but something held me back. I didn't want to fight anymore. I just wanted to face them with the truth in my hand, without needing to say anything, just to show them that they chose the wrong side, that they had left me alone when I needed them most, and that now they would have to swallow reality. So I decided. I called Adriana and asked for help. I knew she and her mother, my Aunt Antonella, were the only ones who still saw me as a victim, not a culprit. I told them I wanted to take the DNA test, but I couldn't go there alone because no one would listen. I needed them to be with me, to bear witness, to hold me together if everything went wrong. They agreed immediately. For the first time in a long time, I felt less alone. I cried when I hung up. I cried with anger, relief, fear, everything, but I cried silently lying on the floor because I didn't want to make a show for anyone. I just wanted truly to get out of this hole with my head held high. I spent the night awake, thinking about what I would say, what I would ask, what I would hear. The next day, I woke up with a heavy heart, but with something else too, a desire to face everything. I no longer wanted to run away. I showered, ate a little, and left with a tightness in my chest that felt like it would crush me. I got in the car and drove aimlessly, trying to gather my thoughts. Every minute was a mixture of anger, fear, and hope. I arrived at Adriana's house, and when I saw her, I felt a relief I couldn't explain. She hugged me and told me she would be with me the whole time. There, I realized I didn't have to face this alone. For a second, I felt like maybe it was possible to turn things around, even if the journey was painful. We started talking about how we would proceed, how I would approach Anna and Mateus without being deceived, and especially how we would get the DNA test. I was nervous, but there was a different clarity in the air. Finally, I was going after the truth, and no one could silence me anymore. We gathered our courage and went to their apartment. My stomach churned, my hands trembled, but I felt a strength growing within me, something I hadn't felt in a long time, the courage to face it. I knocked on the door, took a deep breath, and then took another. When Anna opened the door, I couldn't say anything right away. She tried to smile, but I could see the guilt in her eyes. Mateus appeared soon after, confident, thinking I wouldn't do anything. I sat in the living room, and with Adriana by my side, I explained that we needed to clarify some things. I didn't yell, I didn't curse, but each word was heavy, loaded with everything I'd swallowed up until then. I told her it was time to bring the truth to the table, that if the baby was mine, he needed to know, and that no matter what, I would no longer allow myself to be blamed for something that wasn't my fault. I felt the tension in the air, but I also felt something liberating. I was finally in control of my own story. The DNA test was scheduled for the following week, but that day had already changed everything inside me. For the first time in a long time, I was no longer running from anyone, not even myself. I realized I could feel pain, sadness, and anger without letting them destroy me. I could finally act. And more than that, I knew I didn't need anyone's approval to be right, to seek justice. I left with the strange feeling that everything could still go wrong, but that at least I was no longer lost. I had decided to face life head-on, and that gave me an energy I hadn't felt since before the betrayal. I returned home exhausted, but in a good way, as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I sat on the couch and thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the rejection, the abandonment by my family, and also about what was to come. I knew the wait for the test would be difficult, that I would suffer, but I also knew there was no going back. I needed the truth, even if it hurt more than anything I had ever felt before. For the first time, I felt that it wasn't just the pain that defined me. I realized I could rebuild my life, even if I had to do it alone. That night, I cried for the first time since it all began. But it wasn't tears of despair, it was tears of relief. I was finally doing something. I was no longer at the mercy of Mateus, Anna, or my parents. I had made my own decisions, and this gave me enormous strength. I understood that I didn't need their approval, that I didn't need anyone's understanding to act correctly. I realized that even with all the pain, there was still a path for me, and that, by choosing to follow it, I had already taken the first step toward freeing myself from all that toxicity. The days leading up to the DNA test were unbearable. Every call, every message, every glance in the mirror reminded me of everything that had happened. I couldn't turn my mind off it, and at the same time, I knew I needed to focus. It was during this period that I realized how much I had neglected myself, how much I blamed myself for things that weren't my fault. I was tired of feeling small, humiliated, and invisible. I started taking care of myself, looking at myself head-on, remembering that I had value even if no one else could see it. I slept little, ate poorly, but my head was clearer than ever. For the first time, I could feel a mixture of pain and hope at the same time. On the day of the test, the tension was almost unbearable. I walked into the lab with Adriana and Aunt Antonella by my side, feeling every muscle in my body tense. I looked at Mateus and Anna, who seemed confident, almost disdainful, assuming I had nothing to offer, thinking I was just the problematic brother. I took a deep breath and remembered everything I'd been through since discovering the betrayal, the abandonment, the rejection, the hatred, the sadness, the guilt they'd placed on me. But I also remembered the strength I'd begun to feel, the courage born from nothing, the realization that I could seek the truth and face any consequences. I handed over my materials, took another deep breath, and sat down, letting my body relax a little. Each minute felt like an eternity. I wanted so badly for everything to be resolved, for the truth to come out, for me to finally be able to stop carrying that weight alone. As we waited for the results, I realized how much my life had changed. I was no longer that lost boy who cried alone in the bathroom, feeling guilty about everything. I had made an important decision to stop hiding. The wait was agonizing, but also empowering. I began to think about the future, about what I would do next, and realized that no matter what the test showed, I was already stronger than I had ever been. I began to see possibilities that hadn't existed before. I could finally rebuild my life, no longer for anyone else, but for myself. This thought gave me hope, a feeling I hadn't felt in years. And even though I was scared, I could smile inside, because I knew that whatever came, I would no longer be the victim. When the results finally arrived, I was shaking. I grabbed the envelope with sweaty hands and took a deep breath before opening it. Seeing what was written, I felt an explosion of emotions, relief, pent-up anger, pain mixed with clarity. The test showed the baby wasn't mine, and for the first time in months, I could truly breathe deeply. Everything I'd been through still hurt, but now I could see clearly it wasn't my fault. I hadn't done anything wrong, and I was free to rebuild my life without carrying the guilt of someone else's betrayal. I felt a strange strength, as if I'd been lifted from a huge weight. The tears came, this time without shame, without fear. I could cry and still feel proud of myself. I had faced everything and emerged victorious, even though the pain remained. After everything, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. It wasn't complete peace, but it was a beginning. I began planning my next steps, like moving away from everything that was hurting me, rebuilding my career, my relationships, my life. I realized I could trust myself, that I could make decisions that were right for me without depending on anyone else's approval. I still felt angry at Mateus, Anna, and my own family, but I began to realize that anger no longer controlled me. I could feel, acknowledge, and move forward. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free to live my life on my own terms, without guilt, without fear. And that, as simple as it may seem, was the greatest victory I could have at that moment. After the test, I decided I needed to distance myself from everything that reminded me of that betrayal, that family that blamed me, and that cycle of pain. I could no longer allow myself to be held hostage by memories that only destroyed me. I also began opening up to people outside my family, friends I'd neglected, people who truly cared. I realized that true support didn't come from blood ties, but from those who were truly willing to be by my side, even in the worst moments. This taught me something important. Family isn't just those who share your last name, but those who support you, understand you, and value you. With Adriana and my Aunt Antonella, I had witnesses, but I also had genuine friendship, and this gave me the courage to move forward without fear of being alone. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could trust someone without fear of being betrayed again. This was a feeling I'd completely forgotten existed, and it made me realize that, although betrayal had marked my life, there were still good people around me. As the days went by, I realized my anger no longer needed to control me. I could feel everything, but I could choose how to react. I still thought about Matthias and Anna, about what they did, and I still felt the pangs of betrayal, but that pain no longer destroyed me. I told my story to some close friends because I needed to externalize everything that was bottled up inside me. Talking helped me organize my thoughts, process the pain, and recognize my achievements. I felt ashamed at times because it seemed like everyone had an opinion about my life, but I also felt proud of myself for having faced everything, for having sought the truth, for not giving in to anger or destruction. I was allowing myself to feel, but also allowing myself to grow. At the end of that phase, I looked at myself in the mirror and smiled for the first time without guilt or fear. I saw someone who had been through horrible times, but who was still standing. I had lost trust in many people, but I found it in myself again. I still had scars, and probably would for a long time, but I learned that scars don't mean weakness, but rather that you survived. I could cry without shame, laugh without fear, and that was a huge victory. I began to plan my future without looking back, without depending on anyone's approval, and I realized that the freedom I felt now was far more valuable than any approval or attention anyone in my family could give me. For the first time, I felt like I was truly living. Over time, I began to realize that my life no longer needed to revolve around my family's betrayal or rejection. I could set my own rules, my own boundaries. I learned to say no without guilt, to prioritize my peace above all else. Little by little, I was rebuilding my routine, my friendships, my career. I still felt the pain of everything that happened, but it was no longer an anchor. It was just a reminder that I survived. Every small step, every decision I made for myself gave me back a little more confidence. I realized that being strong isn't about not feeling pain, it's about moving forward despite it, and I was finally doing it. The experience taught me about boundaries, about respect, about truth. I understood that life is too short to be trapped by people who hurt you. I still feel a pang of sadness when I think about everything I lost, how my family reacted, about Matthias and Anna. But this sadness no longer paralyzes me. I learned that the important thing is not to erase the pain, but to transform it into strength. Every tear I shed, every night awake, every moment of despair brought me here. And here, finally, I am at peace with myself. I was able to turn things around, rebuild my life, and most importantly, regain my emotional freedom. Today, looking back, I clearly see how the turning point began that day I discovered the betrayal. It was painful, it was cruel, but it was also the beginning of my liberation. I learned that we can't control the actions of others, but we can control how we react. And I chose to react with courage, seeking the truth and prioritizing my well-being. Even though I was afraid, even though I was tired, even though I was hurt, I chose to stop hiding. This choice gave me the greatest reward, the feeling that my life belongs to me, not to the actions or judgments of others. I finally feel in control of my destiny. Today, I still deal with the remnants of that pain, but the difference is that I'm no longer held hostage by it. I can smile, I can plan, I can believe that the future can still be good. I allowed myself to start over, and that changed everything. It wasn't easy, no one said it would be, but with each step, I realized it was worth facing, confronting, and surviving. I'm stronger, more aware, and freer than I've ever been. The truth set me free, and today I live proudly in who I've become. someone who survived betrayal and abandonment and who managed to find peace and strength within themselves. And that in itself is a victory no one can take away.